No, I don't.
Okay. I'll just say that we don't know which year exactly this structure that was originally was part of the synagogue was demolished. Um, but this was the photo that Ophira showed of the boy near the inscription. This is the same entrance as you can see here, and um, basically now there is a road there. So this part is demolished, and then they had to put a new wall or some construction in order to get the wall stronger. In that what we have actually as the Karumbangam synagogue today.
Uh,
Ophira?
yeah, I'm sorry.
We lost the.
I'm coming back. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah. So this what I want to say with that is that we don't know who was also in charge during that during the period that this part of the synagogue was demolished. But I think we can put our finger on this, process, which is quite slow but very very let's say well done in the way that the history is erased pieces by pieces, and it's not a thing of a year or two. Now we are facing the probably, I hope, the last evidence of this erasing process, but yeah, we can see some evidence for that in the last 70 years or so.
So it's probably because they wanted to, that's what we read here and there, that the Cochin town wanted to enlarge the road, so they removed this structure that you see in the front. And this structure is important because if you read the Hebrew of the inscriptions, it looks like what these people from Europe did was adding this structure in the front to the synagogue. We still need to have some good material culture around it, but the point is there are many good reasons to think that the 1344 inscription belonged to Karavumbagam and not to a synagogue that is no more. So if it ever was, yeah, probably there was, but we don't think it was as important as Karavumbagam. Mm-hmm. And a little bit about the inside parts of the synagogue. This also, I think, Meidad should say a few words about.
Yeah. We talked about the building till now and the inscription, but as you can see from your left side, this is a photo that we just discovered in a private collection of Yakira Madai, which is the daughter of the trustees of this synagogue. And you can see the glory of it in the 1940s. The Ark were brought by these trustees to Israel. He succeeded to bring it and to found the delivery. But then in a mysterious way, which we won't get into it, it didn't find itself in the end by the Cochini community or even not the Cochini community, and of course not in the hands of this particular synagogue community. In the end of the process, it's now until this day, from the 1950s until this day, in a village of European Jews. There were many discussion and many version of what has happened, but in the end, it basically was brought as a gift to this village by the Jewish agency, and in the same time, the trustees had to give it up from different reasons. But this is also, again, this is the way things are raised, is that also this object, this artifact, amazingly carved and very beautiful, is not in the hand of the community, and it's not in the historical and cultural awareness. Just for the story, this Ark of Torah could be in my village synagogue because this community has many members in my village. But of course, we don't have it these days.
Yes.
Anything else, Ophira?
No, just to draw your attention to the fact, that Paradeshis always tell everybody how the Maharaja of Mysore gave them this and the Maharaja of gave them that. So the Maharajas of Cochin and the big people and rich people of the area were also connected with Kadamum synagogue. The ark, the wood, the teak wood for the
Yeah.
ark, donated by the Cochin Maharaja, and possibly also before that, various things were given, and various types of connections were there between the rulers of Cochin and the area and the Jews of Kadamum. So now we would just, I think we should really rush it a little bit because we are already nearly half an hour. So I'll just say a few words about these structures. This synagogue was kind of gradually dismantled. The first thing that happened is that the Israeli museum people came and bought or took, I'm not sure, we don't know precisely what happened. The history of what happens to these artifacts is also something to investigate. But you see the beautiful wooden ceiling. And this wooden ceiling, you know, if you can compare it to what you know from churches and mosques and other synagogues in Kerala, you have those squares with the lotuses. That in churches, this is the work of my student, Percy Arfin. She drew my attention to these lotuses, and she's now working on Vastu Shastra texts. And she could trace the development of those lotuses that if you think about kutambalams in Kerala, right? They have a ceiling that has those squares, wooden squares, and in each square there is a deity. But when the artisans, the asharis, the carpenters, construct such ceilings for monotheists, in the case of Christians, they replace it with angels. In the case of Jews and Muslims, they replace them with lotuses. So again, just, it's not my observation, it's Percy Arfin's observation. But the thing is that this ceiling has only a few squares and they are much bigger. And it looks like this is an earlier phase of the design of these ceilings. So this is another feature of this synagogue that is older. The whole content is currently at the Israeli Museum. Again, in a museum, not in the living context and not at the ends of the community. And as for the building, when Meidad and Taufik Zakaria did their work, you see the graffitis on the wall, and they were trying to bring back to memory the lost Jew town of Cochin, of these two synagogues, and there are other objects there as well. I was at the same time traveling in Kerala with Merdad and Natalie Shukohi. Maybe some of you heard about them. They are scholars of architecture and art history, and they are the only ones to have properly document and study the mosque of India since the 1980s. And they really wanted to study also synagogues. They wanted to see the Paradeshi synagogue. I said, no, you should see Kadavumbaga. They forgot about Paradeshi after they saw this building. For people who know the history of architecture in India and in general, immediately they are very senior people. They are 70 years old and more. They immediately took a pencil and a small piece of paper, and they started sketching the architectural plans of the synagogue. And they told me, I hope they are going to write about that. They told me, you see, the buttresses, the way that the walls of the synagogues are built are with an old manner of construction, which shows, they say, that this structure is the oldest of all the synagogues in Kerala. And they also told me they think it is before the 16th century. All this still requires proper study and proper proof. But these are the issues that we have to think, okay, what's going on with the synagogue? So now we should say, to talk a little bit about Tecumbagan Pali. So would you like to say something about your observations about the street, etc.?
Yes. This street, yes, Ophira?
Yes, please go on.
Yes, as you see, the number. This is the Paradesi Synagogue at the end of the street. All the street until the end is belong to the Paradesi Jews. However, if you see number two is the Tecumbagan Patancheri Pali. This was belong to the Malabar Jews. It was never until now. No one think or ask, why is a Malabar Jew is at the middle of a Pardesi street? How come? Because at the history, the relationship between the Paradesi Jews and the Malabar Jews were not so good. So how come? This is one question. Another question, if you see at the picture on the right, at the top you see the villa of the Paradesi member, who is the brother of the famous Koder Paradesi trustee. He was a big man at the Paradesi community. His brother decided that he can build his house on a Malabari synagogue. You see, this is an un-Jewish thing. To live at a place who was a synagogue, you cannot do this thing. But I don't know how this person, this Paradesi Jew, he built his house on the Tekumbagem Valley. So this synagogue was forgotten. Nowadays, people say that Kerala have 7 synagogues, which is not true. We had 8. Ofira, you can...
Yes, thank you for that. So these are the kind of questions that Joshua was bringing up again and again, and made us think. So we went back into the sources, and in the sources, you see, that's what is drawn on the map. Number 1 is the Paradeshi synagogue. You can see the Dutch palace, you can see the Payanur Bhagavati temple, and you can see, and also in some sources, it specifically says that the Maharaja of Cochin gave a plot of land to the Paradeshi Jews to build their synagogue. And we are asking, why does it have to stick out, at the end of the street? Because obviously, when they built their synagogue, there was no place for their synagogue in Jewtown. It was already populated by the community of Tekumbagam. There are other evidences for that. Just let me go to the next slide. Sorry, there's some noise. Okay. Before we go to the inscription of that synagogue that is no more, unfortunately, you can see, maybe Meidad would like to talk about these objects.
Yeah, so these objects, in a weird way, that in a way we have evidence, so it's very nice that they got to the Magnus Museum in Berkeley. But from the other hand, we don't know how and in which way they found themselves from Kerala in the West these days. So I will say one thing, you can see David Mendelbaum, which came in the 1930s to research photo in black and white in the right, and then the inscription probably in the museum storage on the left. And you can see the Ark of Torah, which is, I would just say that it's dated a bit earlier than the Paradeshi Ark of Torah, but they are almost the same. So you can see one model that was probably copied few years after that to a newer synagogue.
And I would just add one thing here about the wooden inscription. You see the black and white picture shows where the wooden inscription was pasted. It was pasted at the entrance of the Tekumbagam synagogue. And since I visited so many mosques, 16th century mosques and earlier mosques in Kerala, the idea of having a wooden inscription at the entrance seems to me connected. Not only that, also those little lotuses. You can see that Shukohi says that in the case of the Arabic inscriptions from mosques in Kerala, the lotuses separate the Quranic verse from the historical data. In this case, I don't know. It's the only wooden inscription that we have left from Kerala Jewish communities. But I cannot fail by seeing the different connections. Normally what they do is they compare the arcs and they compare the artworks to Italy or to Christian churches in Kerala. This is not to say that there were not also various intersections with the Christians of Kerala, but trying to distance the Jews from the Muslims of Kerala and the shared history they had is part of the erasure of history and the colonial bias. Okay, I'll just try to Just a minute, I have some technical problems. Okay. Lastly, and we are nearly the end, we have the cemeteries. I thought we had another slide. Anyways, there is also an inscription. Maybe we just ignore to put it on the, yes. There is also an inscription for Tecumbagan Pali. I didn't transcribe it here. The inscription is gone, it's lost, but it is documented in David Sassoon's catalogs of Hebrew and Aramaic inscriptions from India. And that inscription says very clearly that this synagogue was constructed by David Castiel in 1489. That is 9 years before the Portuguese reach Kerala. A Jew comes from Spain via Yemen, it's again a Seleucid era inscription, and constructs the Tecumbagan synagogue. And this synagogue and these facts, even though the synagogue was erased, even though that all its artifacts were scattered all across the world, even though an inscription is lost, but documented in another, in a catalog of David Sassoon that all researchers are studying, Tecumbagan is not mentioned. Everybody says it was built in the 17th century. This is the process of erasure. Well, if you don't mind, Meidad and Yoshua, we'll just rush through this, the cemeteries, because we feel that there is also an issue with the cemeteries of the Jewish cemeteries of Cochin. The Paradeshi synagogue is very well known. It has a wall around it. And the other cemeteries, all the tombstones are taken away. Some of them moved to the Paradeshi synagogue. Some of them are used as wash stones in the homes of the people who live there. Nobody remembers precisely where the old cemetery was. In interviews that my dad took with Yakira Madai, that elderly person who shared photos with us, and also this old photo of Namya Muta's grave, she said that Tecumbagan had a separate cemetery. So there were 3 cemeteries. And we suspect that at some point, all this plot was one Jewish plot. Everybody was buried together until for some reason they started the separations. We know that the wall around the Paradeshi, the new cemetery, that's how it's called, the new cemetery, was built in 1898. So it's a very late period in which the separation between the Paradeshi's graves and the other graves occurred. Namya Muta was still a saint. You see, this is the only grave that is left intact because he was considered